First up is Stephanie. Okay. I think I mentioned this in the comments. Let's take the sound off. The You've got, raining studios. The kind of God rays don't necessarily. It's an interesting effects, but they don't necessarily relate to the water drips. And I found the combination just sort of odd, where they were both at the same time. So I'm thinking if you want to keep the rays, maybe have the rays finish first and then start the ripple effect afterwards. And the other idea I had was, what if, might take a different image or a different kind of view of this image, but what if if the dock was a little more horizontally oriented, which, like I said, would take a different image, and then you had the text going along the dock. That might be interesting because it's like the rain's hitting the dock and making the ripples. Anyways, it's just an idea. But I thought the rain effect works really well. The burn-in's nice, and your background image choice is good. And yeah, I mean, I think this works well. You could have done something with some more movement or changes here, which could, something to think about. You could involve some smoke or dust or something like that, just to get it to be a little bit more alive. Or maybe kind of punch out these black shapes a little bit at a time and break them up. But it works okay as it is. I think it could just be a little bit more dynamic. But overall, good job. Next up is Jasmine. So I think the big waves is pretty strong. If you wanted to, draw a series of these and have them animated and then kind of freeze in that position, that would be kind of cool. Um, you could probably do like a, I don't know, 6 to 10 frame cycle of animation. Um, just where the squiggles change a little bit each frame and then come back to this position by the end. With the waves kind of moving in this direction, might be neat if you wanted to do that. But I think it works strong without it. It's just that there isn't any movement on it. It might be nice to have some movement. And we had some correspondence about this already. I think the blood drips are working well now, but that the rosary rotation needs improvement. Where it's pivoting from maybe around this point right now, and I think the pivot needs to be much, much, much higher. Just a quick in After Effects. Just gonna hide this for a moment. If you've got an object, just pretend this is the rosary thing or something, and you can use this pan behind tool and take the pivot point and move it, to wherever you want. Even up above off screen there, and then I'll select this and hit R for rotate, and then should rotate around. So now it's rotating around where that pivot point is as an axis. Um, yeah, use the pan behind tool to um, put the pivot point, higher up and off screen, and then work on the timing. I think the other thing I mentioned was if you've got some keyframes on here, I'm just going to do a few. Let's see. Oh, that's actually too slow. Much too slow. Sorry. Wasn't really looking at my timing. So these should all be easy ease. So take a look at that now. So you get a bit. I'll do it again. Oh, okay, maybe I've got some extra ones. Don't need that one. Oops. That's even a little bit fast, but you get the idea. With the easy ease thing, you don't get those hard stops and start at the end. And maybe go bigger on the text. That's pretty small. And yeah, you could do like an animated mask if you wanted to sort of like reveal the text like it's being written, the signature. But it's okay as is. Next up is Morgan. That's sound on. All right. So yeah, I really like how you see the blue through the dragon. One thing right now it feels more like maybe water than it does fire, like the lights and reflections that you see in water, and you have the sound of fire here, right? Don't you? And I remember you mentioning fire, so I expected to see fire, which basically I think the problem is there should be much sharper shapes and much faster shapes. So maybe you scaled it up and blurred it a lot. I'm not sure how it got to look so watery. I mean, except for that it's blue, but I think it's fine to be blue, but it's just the movement is so slow. It has more of the feel of ripply water, and for me that doesn't evoke fire the way it is now, so I would try a different fire video behind it. um, and yeah, I like this a lot. Oh, I should turn the sound off again. um, I really like the shape, how that really shows the damage to the wood, and then the smoke layered on top is really a nice touch, and all the little damage to the letter here, all those little bits out of it. It's really, I think that worked out really well. I don't think I'd change anything on that. Yeah. So just mostly just try a different background image. Um, I don't know if maybe it's just the resolution of the image, but that edge looks a little rough. I don't know if you can get that to look a little cleaner. What are we, 640 by 386. I mean, if you wanted to go, if you have the resolution of the source images, if you wanted to go, 1280 by 720 for the full thing, it's going to look sharper. So maybe it's just the resolution itself of the image that's making that look a little rough. So yeah, feel free to go, HD if you would like. Next up is Tess. All right. So first of all, I really like the graphic style. I'm guessing these are all your original illustrations. It looks really cool. That kind of nice angular style. You might want to touch up the edges, particularly on this one that's kind of looking jagged and catching my eye. But overall, those look really good, and I really like how it turns here. I think that's a nice effect. Um, I think I understood you wanted to use the particle effect built in, but I really think you would just be better with just like a video of smoke with a mask around it so that it fits the appropriate space, because that smoke looks kind of weird right now. I think just a video of smoke would be a lot stronger. And those little particle bits don't really look like smoke anymore once they get separated. And I like the font, or it looks like pretty. I don't know if that's hand done text but it looks interesting, and it kind of sticks with that very angular theme. You did go way over the 17 seconds, but I think you just didn't end it. Yeah, you just yeah. It it just needs to fade down at the end, and then stop here. So in After Effects, make sure if you just go 1700, enter. I guess this is already exactly 17. But if your thing is longer than, like if I have a composition that's longer than that, let's say my composition is 30. Just see the whole thing. So this one's 30 seconds long. If I wanted to make it 17, I would just go to 17. Enter, and then grab this guy right here and hold down shift, and he'll snap to the end there. And then when you go to render, it'll only render out those 17 seconds. Yeah, but I think this one's good. I really like the look of it. It's got a consistent style across the whole thing. Really, I think the main thing is that smoke, to rework that smoke. Next up is Santiago. Alright, that's good. Yeah, I like the style of the gun shooting out the flag. That's kind of fun. That works well. And, good choice of colors and stuff. I think that, somehow this Old West thing going with his very kind of modern sans serif font seems a little... I guess part of it is because it's on the flag, so it's like I feel like it should all be in that same style because it's like part of the flag that's coming out of the gun. One thing you could do that might be fun, just to break it up a little bit, is you shoot this way, and then maybe as this is rolling up, you could have this gun go off screen, and then just a flipped gun coming in from the other side to do the presents, just to kind of keep it moving so it's not all from one side. That's okay. I don't know. I guess I don't know. I feel like I'd like some movement on there somehow. But it's a good choice of font, and I like that you see the texture through the font. So maybe it's all right as is. But I sort of imagine having some movement. The other thing that's strange is we're 2 seconds in until we see the orange, and then we're 3 seconds until we see the gun. I really think you should trim the head of this off. And you said something about not being able to fade up, but I don't really see why you couldn't fade up the orange. Because you have this extra time here even. I mean, like for example, this could all be orange. It could be fading, not that I wanted to fade up that long, but it could be fading up for almost 2 seconds theoretically while that orange is coming in. But really what I would say is trim off some of the head and then do a fade up, and then come in from there. So yeah, the font, consider having a gun come in from the other side. Turn on motion blur. If you want to take a quick look, I've just got this little bit of movement here. If I want to turn on motion blur, I need to activate it. This activates it for the whole sequence, on and off for the whole sequence, and then Click this toggle switches and layers. This activates it for an individual layer. It's a little bit subtle here, but you can see that soft edge now with it on and off. So here's, I'll just preview the animation. That's what it looks like with it on. And then let's turn it off. And this is sort of a subtle difference, but if it was moving bigger, you'd see it more. I'll just show you a more extreme example. Oh, it's not in the right tool. Here we go. And let's turn that back on. So yeah, when it's moving really fast, you'll see a lot of blur like that, which can look a little bit. It helps with the quick movement and stuff. That's that was an extreme case just to show you the blur, but I would turn that on. And actually, that advice really goes for probably all of you. Most of the time, I would say you want motion blur on. Okay, yeah, could work. Next up is Rand. Oops, let's get the audio on. Let's start it over. Alright, yeah, it's pretty complex. You've got a lot going on, and it seems like you stuck to the storyboard idea. So for this, looks good. You might want to try like a ripple or sort of distortion effect on the water. Just to sort of break it up a little bit and give it a little more watery look. If you wanted a little bit of movement on the reeds in the foreground, it'd be a nice touch. I feel like the font you chose is a little bit sort of challenging. It's just kind of thin, and it's just a lot going up. So for a few things. One is it comes on a little late because it's like Shira, like we just barely got a chance to read it before everything's changing. So if it can get on a little earlier, that would be one thing. The next thing is it's just thin and script-like. And the next thing is try to make it work without a drop shadow and without the bevel. Those are typically frowned on in graphic design circles these days anyway. So yeah, I think it'd be stronger without those. And then you might play with some blur. You could do something like you could put these reeds in the foreground a little bit out of focus. Even maybe these in this edge of this, in this actually the tree there, you might be pushing it then. But the idea of being some depth of field, so because the things close to the camera can be out of focus. And I guess for this one, I'm not really getting why the sign is transparent. I would think that would be fully opaque. And again, for this text, you again have a drop shadow and an outline, and try, just maybe go for a bolder text and try to lose things like the outline and the drop shadow and stuff like that. I think that this smoky mist isn't working great. Maybe just find like a video of just some wispier smoke and just put it on top and do change the mode to multiply. It might look a little better. Same thing with the text here. Try to stay away from the outlines and the bevels and the drop shadows and all that stuff. And make sure you turn on motion blur for the text. And then what else? Yeah, Yeah. But overall, it's good. It's kind of ambitious. There's a lot going on here, and a lot of stuff you had to assemble. So, considering all that, it's looking pretty good. I don't know. It's very strange that you'd have clouds moving in different directions along the top. I mean, if there's wind blowing, the wind's going to blow the clouds in one direction. They're not going to move against each other. I know we're not working in the world of reality. It's very graphic, but it's still kind of odd to have them moving in opposite directions. Um, it just looks a little distracting. So maybe just, and also you have these clouds moving and those not, but they're all the same size. So I would just leave those static and keep it simple. Next up is Catalina. All right. Yeah, I like all the. You got some original illustrations in there. It looks like. I think this could be interesting to do some animation on. I can just do a quick demonstration for you. Just gonna get rid of these guys, and you would use your image, but I'm just gonna create a solid to make it easier on myself. So just pretend that's your door there, and then you'll start by taking the pan behind tool and move this to a corner here. And then what I would do is enable 3D layers there with this thing, and I'll select this and click R for rotation, and then you could animate this rotation here to. You could do the same thing with your door or doors to get that going. So it's an easy way to have those swing open and close. So I might start at 0 and key it, and then go forward, I don't know, a little bit, and it could go out and back the other way. And then maybe like a little bit smaller, and then maybe it settles down back to 0, something like that. See how that looks. And then let's change all these to easy ease so that the movement's smoother, and enable motion blur for all of them here, and enable motion blur for this layer here. Let's watch that. Yeah, we kind of, something like that could look kind of nice with the two doors. Get a little more interesting. Here I don't really get what's going on. I guess, it looks sort of like a showdown, but they look like the same character because almost everything's the same. And then this guy's, he sort of looks like he's reaching for guns, but he doesn't have holsters, and he's facing the opposite way of this other guy. I guess I would expect to see the back of this guy, and I expect the two of them to look different if it's a showdown between the two of them. So I'm misreading it. I'm not sure if I get exactly what's going on with the image, but right now it looks kind of strange because he's in that pose like he's about to draw guns, but he doesn't have guns, and he's facing the wrong way. Anyways. And then this gets really blurry. I don't think you have the resolution to do this. I think you need to, because look how chunky this is looking now. You would need to kind of paint this at a much higher resolution to begin with, to be able to zoom in that far. Like start with like a 6,000 by 6,000 image or something like that, or whatever the corresponding aspect ratio would be for that, but much 3 or 4 times the normal size image, and then paint it that big so that it holds up if you want to be able to zoom in this far. Um, and that, I mean, that's supposed to be like a revolver thing, but it just looks kind of strange. So I think you need to get some photo reference and rework that image, because these aren't evenly spaced. You know, 1, 2, 3 up here, and then 2 down there, and then anyway, it'll all make sense if you just look at the reference image. I think you need to rework that because it looks kind of funny right now. And I'm not sure why this text is just slowly lowering in um, the Batwing brawls. I mean, it's a good choice of font for a Western thing. Maybe a more textured background can be more interesting. And then maybe rethink how the text enters. I would say either keep it simple, like it just kind of fades in, or come up with sort of a justification. If it's dropping it from the top, why is it dropping it from the top? Does it have something to do with it being a Batwing, or how does the Batwing come into play? And maybe that is expressed with the movement. So either have something that like conceptually kind of makes sense, or just keep it really simple. But the kind of just having it move down just for the sake of moving down isn't that great. Okay, but yeah, it's a good start. Keep working on it. Okay, next up is Stephanie. Okay, I like the billiards theme. That's cool. If you look at the rotation here, a couple things. One is you might want to, one of two things: either speed up its sideways movement or slow down the rotation, because right now it's kind of sliding, like it doesn't feel like it's sticking to the surface. It's rotating more for the distance it's moving. Then you might want to have it come to a bit more of a gradual stop, because it's moving so slowly, so I expect it to come to a more gradual stop. And there's also that kind of little jerk in there, right there, like you have that extra little spin. So take a look at maybe you have a keyframe you can delete, or maybe more than one actually. You really shouldn't need very many keyframes. And this is, I think it's all right. I guess I'd like to see. It's that sort of side to side. I think it needs some kind of up and down movement too. Like if it's moving kind of along this direction, because right now it's sort of moving just this sort of horizontally, and I think it should move kind of in and out off over that direction, rather than just sideways back and forth. I think that would look more natural if it slid sort of along this vector. It can vary a little bit, but I think it should mostly kind of move back and forth. So meaning it has to both move up and back at the same time. I like the timing of the movement for the hit. You could probably follow through a little bit more. And I think that I would expect the ball to move off the screen a little bit faster and also spin. And it would be kind of cool to do backspin, actually, for that. Might look nice. So like some quick backspin would still move in that direction, because, pool balls do that. And I like this stick 'em up font. I think it's a good choice. Yeah. You could do like a little drop shadow underneath it to give it a sense of, just kind of a blurred circle here to make it feel like it's sitting on a surface. Cool. Alright. Next up is Jackie. Yeah, kind of cool. I guess it's pretty jerky, but I guess that's the sort of nature of it going through a sewing machine. I think one thing that might help is to do some tracking. Let me see if I can demonstrate. I gave tracking a try, and I think it's failing because if you look at the frames that it's actually moving, there's a lot of motion blur, and it's just, I guess it's like when you look at those frames in between, I'm having trouble. But like if you look at that, there's so much motion blur that the tracker's having a really hard time moving it. I think one thing that would help with this would be for you to turn on motion blur on this object. So you've done a pretty good job of getting it to stick with the movement of that, but I think it would feel like it was with the rest of it more if it was blurring the way the background was. And the way to turn on motion blur is just right here and then turn it on for the layer itself. And I like the idea of the sewing machine sound. And I think, yeah, anything you can do to kind of work the animation to try and get it to match closer to that movement is going to make it easier. So I can see, like here the text is slipping compared to the background. So if you can, put a little bit more time in to match that up, I think it'll be a little bit more pleasing to look at, a little easier. But it's a cool concept, and I like the footage, and I think if you could just tighten that up and add the motion blur, it's going to look better. Yeah, it looks good. Next up is Jonathan. All right. Yeah, I think you've got a lot of good concepts here. I think that you could do a little bit more to get it to work better. I think starting with a bomb, if you could get a little bit more shape to it, maybe even just finding like a bomb clip art or something, but something to make it look more like a sphere and less like a perfectly flat circle, I think would help a lot with this because it. And I like the spark idea. But I think the kaboom is not working, especially with this big black border on the edge, and maybe just find like a explosion you can, comp on top of that on like a black background, and then you could just use the multiply blending mode to blend that together. And I get what you're trying to do here afterwards with that, but I think the super high contrast, the white is, and all the yellow and red and stuff is making that look kind of odd. So I get the idea, it's supposed to look like it's been blackened, but if the adjustments you made didn't look quite. The other thing is if you could have, you might kind of just do a blackening thing and have it go in sort of streaks out from the center and kind of leave, maybe like have streaks kind of going, maybe this area is blackened and sort of streaks going out that way, but then leave like the rest of it as is, because that looks kind of strange right now. I guess you want enough so that that whole piece falls off, but still, you could have kind of fairly horizontal streaks that cover this area and kind of leave a lot of the rest of it the way it was, have it kind of fade back to normal. And the way you do that, I think that's pretty hard to read right now. And also, you still have the bomb and the films there, and I kind of think those should be gone. At this point, they're so small. If that basically that should either be gone or much bigger, so we could actually read it somehow. But then there's another copy of it down here as well, which is kind of odd. Stuck to that thing. and then it says films here too. So it's like you have all those. I really think that just needs to be gone because and that really thin red script on this very big busy background is super hard to read. So I think, yeah, maybe just use the same font you did for the Wrangle thing here for films because it's almost illegible there. Yeah, and try, maybe the Wrangle is just a solid white, and maybe if you could have the background be a little bit more black and get rid of this bright white here, and then have those letterings white, and then it films nice blocky white letters, I think it would read okay, or something like that, or solid black and a light background. And this presents. I guess you're getting to the point where the fonts are really jumping around because you've got forget about we get this script, then you have um, this block lettering, and then that script, and then this kind of sort of casual looking font, and then another script. And I just think we're jumping in too many directions font wise. And bright red is typically something to avoid on video. Maybe kind of you can use red, but maybe pull it back a little bit. Go a little dark, a little less saturated, and then drop shadows are sort of frowned upon these days in the design world. So try to see if it works without a drop shadow. Um, okay, yeah, and then maybe try a simpler presents font. That's too much like Comic Sans. And I know it's not Comic Sans, but it's so close to it. And that's also like a much maligned font. Yeah, and think if there's anything you want to do to kind of liven up the animation of the title as well. So I think this could use some work. I definitely think that Kaboom thing is not working right now. I think the look of this damaged cliffside could use some work, and I would go back and I would just take the original image and then kind of paint the damage on top of it, paint some black marks and some whatever kind of damage you want to do, but don't do this effect on it because that looks, well, it doesn't look damaged, and then this super high contrast makes the text on top of that pretty difficult to deal with. But I think conceptually the idea of the name falling off and revealing is kind of cool. Although it would be kind of cool if like it didn't fall at once, like if one letter broke off and another one, or even pieces of letters broke off. That would be kind of nice if you wanted to take it to the next level. But I definitely think it's very busy and super high contrast, so it's hard to see the text. So I think you need to not have it so high contrast. Okay. Okay, we've got Michael. Okay. Yeah, I like the background image. It's a cute photo. I think you might think of some kind of animation or something you could do to bring it to life. I mentioned earlier some of the other ones that drop shadows are typically frowned upon amongst the design world for text. And also, I don't know if this is the Papyrus font, but it looks like the Papyrus font, Papyrus, whatever. And that's another one that's kind of, I don't know, it's sort of like the one every yoga studio uses or something like that. And people are kind of like critical of it. It might not be that one, but it's close enough to it that you might want to try something different. There's a little bit of a spacing issue here between the P and the A as well, and the P and the R. And that may have been how the font came out, but you should adjust the kerning manually then. Yeah, I'm thinking about some animation. And this works alright. Again, not a fan of the drop shadow thing. But I guess what's sort of odd for me here is that, you got that cartoon drawing, and that's interesting. And it kind of works in the theme. But then you have the photo backdrop of wood, and I guess that contrast I don't know, seems difficult. I think it would be better to have sort of a more, cartoon style wood background if you're going to have a cartoon character in front of it. But the two together are looking a little bit odd in this, so consider trying that. And yeah, and I think this font works. That's more interesting. The black on black is a little bit difficult here, where that fades out. So maybe instead of fading the background to black, fade to a solid color first, or just don't fade them down separately. Just fade everything down together, and you won't have that issue. But I would say try. The other thing is the cartoon background with kind of more areas of solid color might look a little less busy when you're dealing with a font that has this kind of narrow lines to it. The busy background makes it a little difficult to read, so a more solid color area on a cartoony wooden board look might work better for that.